What does it take to be a grandmaster? What does that even mean?
Grandmaster is the highest title you can have in chess, and you have to get it in actual competition against internationally ranked players, which includes grandmasters, international masters, and masters, which are actually a lower level of players. But you have to compete. You have to do it in battle. The International Chess Federation has specific numerics that say if you get X number of wins against these players, then you will get what's known as a norm in one event. And three of those norms qualify you for the title of Grandmaster. And so it's got to be done in battle.
Yeah.
There's no gift of the Grandmaster title.
Right. Okay. So is this something that you plan for? It's like, okay, there's a certain event I'm going to, and if I win that event, I'm going to become grandmaster, or a certain series of events. How does that work?
There are tournaments happening all over the world where players can qualify. These are tournaments where players are normally playing for money and trying to win prizes. You enter those tournaments, you either pay to enter or sometimes you're invited to participate. And you just have to do well enough to earn the Grandmaster norm, as I mentioned. It's not a question of winning the tournament itself. That's hard enough. If you got to play against 10 Grandmasters, think of it like having to become an all-star. If somebody said, all right, we're going to line up 10 all-stars, and you just have to beat 5 of them. So you got LeBron, you got Steph Curry, you've got Kevin Durant, and they put 10 of those gangsters in front of you and say, if you beat 5 of these, you qualify to be an all-star. Now, with players like that, you qualify to be a legend of the game, obviously, but you get what
Sure.
I mean.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you're a immigrant and lived in Brooklyn, African-American, not a whole lot of grandmasters like yourself. You were the first Black grandmaster ever, right?
There are no grandmasters. There were none like myself growing up in BK, Brownsville, where Mike Tyson's from. I always joke that Brownsville was so rough, Mike had to get out of Brownsville. But the reality is that there was not a lot of chess going on, but I got obsessed in high school, Brooklyn Technical High School. In the 10th grade, I saw a friend playing. I knew the rules of the game, but that was it. And I thought I could beat him because I was a smart kid. That guy crushed me so bad, it wasn't even funny. I happened to see a book in the library, not even looking for it. I just happened to see a book on the bookshelf as though chess was calling me. And I opened up the book, checked it out of the library, said, I'm going to beat my friend, read the whole book, went back, and he crushed me again. Turns out he had read that book and many other books, but that started the love affair with the game. And I have a very competitive side. So I definitely did not want to stop before I beat my friend.
So competitiveness runs in your family as well, right? Your siblings are both world-class athletes.
Yeah, we're pretty competitive types. My brother's a 3-time world champion kickboxer. My sister's a 6-time world champion boxer. And we're all in the international halls of fame of our various activities, sports. Yeah, it's pretty rough around the dinner table when it's time to play board games. We stay away from our own specialties when it comes to competing directly against each other. But the trash talking is fierce when we get down to some spades or some dominoes or any kind of activity. Nobody wants to lose.
So you said sport. A lot of people don't think of chess as a sport, but it is.
Well, usually people define a sport as something physical, something where you're running, jumping, hitting a ball, throwing something. That's usually how people align the word sports in their minds. But if you just think of a competition where you have to sit for hours on end, focus, one false move, you're dead. You get tired, you get hungry. You have to beat a competitor who is prepared, wily, cunning, looking to take your head off. And if you lose, your ego feels smashed. Okay, if you don't want to call that a sport, it's on you. But we know as chess players that it is intense, it is rough, and don't bring money because we plan to take it.
And you train for these. I mean, you this is something that you physically train for. I mean, that kind of focus for hours and hours, like 6 hours, like some of these matches can take many, many hours. Like that's brutal. And like you said, like intense focus. I mean, a lot of folks listening, I mean, you're sitting there at work and, you're working on your TPS reports or whatever it is. And it's like focus for a half an hour can be exhausting, let alone for a few hours in a match like that. I mean, how do you prepare for that?
Well, I like to tell people so they can understand. If you think back to your college days or any test you had to take, imagine taking a college final that will last 2 or 3 hours. That's nothing. Now think about it back to back, lasting 4, 5, 6 hours. Now think of that as only the first day. You've got to do 9 days of that.
Wow.
And you have to prepare because you are going to play against a player whose games you've seen, who's analyzing all your games, your tendencies. They want to know how when you blink, when you lose, why do you lose? They're deep into your character assessment so they can throw some weird strategies that will make you uncomfortable in the middle of the game. So they might know you better than you know yourself. So that's one aspect of it from the strategic side. The other aspect is just the physical side. It seems like sitting there thinking shouldn't necessarily be that arduous. But as I explained, when you're doing a college final, you know how tiring that is. You walk out of there and you feel like you ran a marathon, let alone two back to back, let alone for 9 days in a row. We do get a rest day. They toss in there so you can recuperate. So you have to be ready from a stamina perspective. You have to have that kind of mental clarity when you're playing. When you start to get fatigued, you want to be calm, especially the longer the game goes, the more critical the moves become. You start making mistakes in that fourth, fifth, or sixth hour, and you can't afford a single mistake because at the professional level, one mistake means death. So we do train for stamina. You do train for mental toughness. Meditation is a big part of it. Whatever it takes to be able to have that kind of stamina and clarity as the hours roll on.
So how did you move up the ranks? I mean, so you talked about finding chess as a young, child in school, and you played your friend and you lost. And so I want to go back to that. Like, how did you go from there to becoming good, to becoming great, to become thinking like, I want to be one of the best in the world. I want to be a grandmaster. I mean, that's quite a journey. A lot of us have played some friends in school, but you made quite a long journey. So talk to us about your progression.
The good news is that they're chess magazines, as you can well imagine, magazines that talk about the greatest players. And I mentioned books before as well, where you read about the epic legends of the game. And so I would read these magazines and I'd see these players who were grandmasters, and you could go over their games. You're not just sitting there like in school playing with your friends. There you can record the games people have seen or heard in movies. People talk about chess like pawn to e4. Usually it's descriptive notation. So pawn to king's bishop 4 or knight to king 3, or now it's algebraic notation. So I won't bore you with the language, but the point is that you can record games and then review those games afterwards, sort of like instant replay for chess. So I'd go over these grandmaster games. I'd be sitting in Brooklyn. There'd be sirens outside, gunshots every so often. And I would be at home going over games of the epic players from the past. And I'd be dreaming about one day being like these players, being good enough to create the masterpieces that I saw unfolding in my eyes, in front of my eyes. In the meantime, I got to beat my friend in high school, which I finally did. I got to somehow make the chess club in high school, which I never did. I mean, the chess team, which I never did. I wasn't good enough to make my own high school chess team, if you can imagine. And also, I was playing in the parks in Brooklyn. So you had hustlers in the park. Good thing New York has a very robust chess scene in the parks. So I'd go to Prospect Park in Brooklyn and start playing these players, and they would whip me, take my money. I was a high school kid. They didn't care if it was 50 cents. Just give us the money. Like they wanted to play, and I wanted to play against them. So I had to, again, study to defeat those guys. And then on top of it, I met a group of largely African-American players who called themselves the Black Bear School of Chess. And they copied it off the idea of the Soviet school of chess. Obviously, the Soviets knew a thing or two about the game. But they were extremely serious about studying, reading books, playing against each other, especially trying to crush each other. And they welcomed me into that group. And these were older men, as much as 6 years older, as much as 20 years older. but they were welcoming in the group. They saw that I had some talent, and their thing was, if you're ready to get your ass kicked, come on in. Like, we're not here to coddle you. We're here to whoop you and see how tough you are. And so that really prepared me for a much more competitive space in chess when I finally had to go to the austere chess clubs, the Manhattan Chess Club, the Marshall Chess Clubs, where a lot of people, frankly, didn't look like me. And you started to see the international masters, the grandmasters, and those are the guys I really want to get better against. So I started participating in a lot of those tournaments. By then I knew the track. It was just a question of working hard to try to get there.
So is there a difference between the type of chess you played with the Black Bears versus, sort of, some of these other more traditional chess clubs? Same style of chess, and there's sort of the chess scene in New York. You said a strong chess scene that you see, guys playing when you go through New York. Is there a difference between that kind of chess or that style of chess and what you might play in, say, a competition?
There is absolutely a difference between the styles in Brooklyn, the Black Bear School. Players were playing a lot of blitz.
Wow.
We didn't have time to sit and play games for 4 or 5 hours. We'd play blitz games that take 4 or 5 minutes. And those games are fast paced. The hands are moving as quickly as Edward Scissorhands, if you remember that old movie. And you just have to be very quick on your feet. The game was far more tactical, which means that people were looking for your mistakes. They were trying to exploit any kind of off move you made and try to steal a piece or even checkmate your king. Quick traps were just as effective as slow strategic grinds. But those didn't work when you went to the clubs because now you were playing long games. You weren't going to catch anybody in some stupid trap that they might fall for. You had to be much deeper, much more strategic in your approach. And so the slow grind was the way. And man, that was a true test. That's where you really separate the top players from the also-rans, because when you have to sit there and suffer, you make a small mistake, a positional mistake, we call it, and your opponent starts to squeeze you and really start to put the pressure on. That's going to take 2 or 3 hours for you to suffer through as you try to survive, right? And then maybe they'll slip and you say, oh, I'm back in the game. But it took 2 or 3 hours just to get to that point.
There's a great video, and Tim Ferriss is looking on as you're playing Blitz, and I think the guy was unsuspecting. It didn't seem like he didn't know you were a grandmaster, right? Everybody's watching, and there's trash talking going on. It's so intense, so much fun to watch. So this trash talking that's happening, like this is part of the Blitz game, certainly not part of the classical game. Is that right? I mean, if you're at a tournament, it's like, you're playing like a 3, 4, 5 hour game. There's no trash talking, right? But it's like just different types of mental warfare going on.
Absolutely. You're not allowed to talk like that in a chess tournament. You're not even allowed to talk. Gamesmanship is an issue. Somebody will call the tournament director over. You could do some slight things. If you look at your opponent too long, then they can call the tournament director and say, this guy's staring at me, get him to behave. Like, little stuff will throw people off.
Yeah.
So you really have to be on your best behavior. There's no such thing when you're playing chess in the parks. There's too much stuff going on. There's, like I said, sirens. There are people watching. There are people talking. You're not just telling them to shut up because they're talking. They're just spectators. And then the reality is, if you actually tell somebody to not talk, that'll be the open door policy to talk even more, because it means that you're being distracted. So we have a lot of fun playing. It's a lot different atmosphere. It's a different kind of warfare, but it's the stuff that I grew up with in Brooklyn. So I was quite used to it. That video is pretty funny because my opponent did not know that I was a grandmaster. He found out only later. He actually knew my name, but didn't know my face.
Listen, I don't play much chess. I've interviewed Jeff Bulington, who you and I talked about before we hit record here. Fascinated with the game. It's not something I've spent much time doing. In reading your book and learning more about you, I'm fascinated with the mental toughness that goes into being successful. It is certainly, the learning and the research and the planning and the prep and the training, all of that like goes without saying. The mental toughness is so so important in chess, that's to a level that I don't think most people understand.
It really is. And you can find a lot of chess players who are extremely talented when they were kids. Like, I've seen extraordinarily talented players as young people. Incredible. They look at the chessboard and they see the moves just that fast. Like, how did this kid see that? And we know that kid is a talent. But then when they start losing against other kids who are extremely talented, they're used to winning all the time. And it's sort of like when you're good in high school as a basketball player, and then you go to college and you go, wait a second, I'm not as good as I thought I was. Those kids start to shy away from getting hit, from the pain of losing. And the difference of the kids who say, you know what, I don't care, I lost, but I'm coming back. I'm going to hone my game, and I'm going to lose again, and I'm coming back again. And that really starts to separate the talented ones from the future grandmasters. And that kind of mental toughness, sometimes it's just innate. Sometimes it's their background. Sometimes it's the right coach who taught them the right way, because a coach can be the deal breaker in that situation, really. Can see a kid who's talented, but they say the right words and the kid loses, and the kid might be in pain and crying, but the coach says just the right words about learning from losing, learning from loss, or using your mistakes as a way to grow. You give just the right advice and the kid gets it. And when the kid gets it, that's when they catapult to a next level.
You talked about that failure leading to these leaps. Like, how does that person who's listening, who said, yeah, but Maurice, I tried to get that promotion, I tried to start that business, I tried to lose that 20 pounds and I failed last time, and just deep inside they've kind of given up, or they've settled for less. I mean, what do you tell them?
Failure is a funny word, because the path to success is often littered with failures. And it's really your attitude that dictates whether or not you're going to call an individual action, an individual loss, a failure, or you're going to call it a stepping stone. Because nobody wins right away and all the time. Nobody. I mean, if Michael Jordan did not make his high school basketball team, you're allowed to fail. It's okay. It is a stepping stone. It is a learning tool. Every single loss, every single so-called failure, every single mistake is a potential learning tool. And the real failure is not learning from the loss, is not extracting all the lessons possible that you can get from a loss. Because in fact, humans learn best through failure. I mean, when we were trying to learn how to walk as babies, you got up and you fell down. And what did you do? You got up again, and then you fell down again. And it kept happening over and over until finally you walked. You got to get back to that baby's attitude that said, it doesn't matter if I fall down, I want to walk. That's what I want to do. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. And so for me, it's really important that people understand the idea of incremental improvement. You've got to do everything step by step, slowly, one little bit at a time. And many times you've got to go backwards so that you can go forwards. If you're learning a new skill, if you're trying to master something that's different from the way you've always done it, it means that you have to revamp, rejigger everything that you know sometimes in order to get to that new place. It's like Tiger Woods back in the day when he was on top of his game and decided to reinvent his swing. You're the best in the world. How are you reinventing your swing, losing tournaments now so that you can do what? Be the best in the world? And that's exactly what he did. So that idea of continuous improvement, the idea of being willing to learn from loss, some of the toughest losses that have happened to me have been some of the greatest in my life. It showed me so much about the game, but it also showed me so much about myself.
You have to choose your words. He said you could choose to call it either a failure or a stepping stone. Like, listen, it's going to feel like failure. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Like losing hurts, losing sucks. It doesn't feel good. We're not going, hey, that was great. I'm just going to call that a step. You're not smiling your way through it. There's pain there. There's internal, maybe even self-doubt creeps in, all of that stuff. Yes, we're acknowledging that all of that is true. All of that is real. All of that is there. Even for the best in the world, like Maurice, what we're saying is choose the right words. If you choose the right words, that's what changes your attitude. Okay, that was a failure. It sucks. It hurt. I didn't like that. I don't want to do it again. Now here's where you got to put in, I'm going to learn from that. I'm going to get better from that. This is a stepping stone. You have to choose those words because listen, the default words in your head, they're not going to be good enough. Those default words in your head are the negative bias that we have, that Maurice has, that I have, that the best in the world have. You hear these best in the world athletes talking about like what they do to override that negative thinking about failure, setback, or even just potential, like what potential you have. You have to actively do that. It doesn't just happen by default. You have to take action. And that's what Maurice is talking about, is taking action, like saying the right words, changing your attitude.
You said that perfectly right. And I will say it is extremely difficult to do it on your own. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't pretend that I went on a journey by myself and I was so smart and so tough that I figured it all out. I had coaches. I had role models with the Black Bear School, whether we're seeing my family members who were excelling at what they did, whether it was hiring a coach, a grandmaster coach, to come and talk about these difficult games that I had. The journey is so much easier when you have trusted advisors in your corner. And I think that a lot of people try to do this stuff on their own. So they're sitting back thinking, I just suck, or what am I supposed to do? But if you have somebody, or the more the merrier, frankly, but people you can trust who can look at it and say, yeah, I see where you made a mistake there. What you should have done is this. Where you can change is this. Yo, I understand how you're feeling. We'll get through this. That's huge. And I just think on so many of the journeys I've seen, people have made it an individual thing. And it doesn't matter what it is in your life, by the way. It's not even about improvement. Just you talk about your skill set in a sport. It's not just your job, even your personal life. A lot of us men don't want to go to therapists, right? When there are challenges, well, therapy stuff is not for me, right? But maybe just having somebody listening alone, just you getting your voice out there and somebody asking good questions so that you can provide they can provide a reflection for what you're saying. And that alone, just talking to somebody solid, can be a difference maker. So you've got to look for that in any areas you have difficulty.
Whether it's in business, whether it's in marriage. I mean, like relationships, that you mentioned therapy, like these are the people we need around us. We see that in sport. We see, okay, Tom Brady had a fitness, a strength and conditioning coach. Like I'm pretty sure Tom Brady knew his way around the weight room. Tom Brady had a nutrition coach. I'm pretty sure he knew what to eat, but he still had these people in his life. And that's how you go from whatever level you're at to your next level, right? Good to great, whatever that is for you. And not everybody's starting from the same level, wherever you're at right now, you want to go to yet another level. You've got to have the team. You've got to have the right people around you. And what's at stake now for the former athlete listening, you're a high school athlete or a college athlete or maybe a weekend warrior, like what's at stake now is not winning a game or winning a match. It's your life. It's your livelihood. It's your legacy. It's so much more important now than it ever was in competition.
And I will say the team can change as well. You can't get locked into the fact that you just have one person who stays all your life. I had multiple coaches. My coaches, when they taught me all they had to teach me, passed me on to another coach. Somebody who can give you a different look, a different aspect. It's not that you don't trust that person anymore. It's just that you stop hearing what they have to say because you've already digested most of it. And it's sort of like your parents, we get smart. Right. Our parents get smarter the older we get. I mean, at some point when you're teenagers, your parents are not as smart. Really, it's because you're getting dumber. But then when you become adults, you're like, wow, they knew some stuff from life experiences. But the trusted advisors, sometimes they're too close. When your mom says, "Oh, it'll be okay, honey," you don't hear that because you figure it's mom. She's going to try to tell me the thing that makes me feel better. And what I need is somebody I can trust who doesn't mind saying the negative stuff or giving the criticism that you really need in order to grow. So that can change. I remember one of my greatest advisors was a sensei Hao. He was a sensei of Aikido, which is a martial art that I practiced for years. And I practiced it because it showed me something about chess that I did not understand or appreciate very well. I was out of the Brooklyn school: attack, 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 seek, kill, destroy. Like that's what my mindset was. But at the highest levels, I was losing. And I came to realize that my attacks were not working. They were actually the fuel for my opponents to create counterattacks. But my mindset was I need to become a better attacker. What I didn't realize was that I actually had to become better at defending and using my opponent's intentions against them. And that's exactly what Aikido is about, unlike something like karate, a more direct kind of kick, punch, maim. Aikido was about receiving the energy and then guiding it in a direction that threw your opponent off balance and then putting them on the floor. But as much as I was learning from the physical training in Aikido, for me, I was translating that physical training into mental training and a mental attitude that transformed my game. It was also important that my sensei was so cool. I was this old Jewish guy who just spoke very practically. He didn't, as much as Aikido had this sort of ethereal, kind of mystical quality, he just kept things simple. And he said, you don't have to, act as though you're connecting with your chi in some space beyond the universe, right? Like it was just go with the flow. Just go with the flow. And he was such a practical guy, and I trusted him 100%. He knows there was not a malicious bone in his body, and anything he said was all about you improving.
My background and my coaching firm is, we do executive and life coaching, and it's like personal performance coaching for the real world. You get these people in your life, right? In whatever area of your life you might need them. And the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, Maurice, is this idea of balancing sacrifices and risks. And you talk about that in your book. Can you talk about how you learn that through chess and how that applies to the listener, right? Whether it's you're trying to get that promotion, build that business, make that career change, what have you.
Magnus Carlsen, the world chess champion and maybe the greatest player of all time. Maybe he is indeed the GOAT. If not, he's one of the top three, no question about it. He had a quote where he said that to not take risks is in and of itself a risky strategy. In chess, we have a bunch of pieces on the board. Sometimes you've got to give one up, like literally give it up, not exchange it. I get a pawn, you get a pawn. I give you my knight for your knight. Literally, I give you a pawn, a knight, a bishop, a rook, or maybe even the queen. And I don't see exactly how it will all play out. So there's a difference between a sham sacrifice in chess and a real sacrifice. A sham sacrifice is one of those, I give you my knight, yeah, but guess what? I knew that not only was I going to win back the knight, I'm going to also win back a pawn or maybe even checkmate your king. I can see that clearly just by looking and analyzing. I see 5, 6, 7 moves ahead. Oh yeah, I'm getting it all back by force. That's a sham sacrifice. A real sacrifice is one of those, I give you my knight, and it looks like I'll have a great position. I'll have a lot of space. Your pieces will be restricted in their movement. I might have a nice little attack against your king, but I gave away a piece. And if my attack doesn't work, then your superior forces will come back to haunt me. Those sacrifices require a certain level of equanimity, a certain level of bravado, a certain level of confidence that it's going to be okay. It's going to work out if I just stay focused. And it's hard for people to make those sacrifices in real life, right? Sometimes you're talking about money, right? How do I balance giving up X number of dollars for what may be a risky proposition in business that may not work out, your investments in life, where you do that is challenging. And I recognize that. But with no risk, there's no reward. Or with little risk, there's little reward. So you have to figure out that balance. And to each his own, trust me, even as chess players, it's not just a monolithic strategy or profile in chess where all chess players sacrifice all the time. There's those chess players who play close to the vest. They're like IRS accountants. They're itemizing every single last chess pawn or piece. I'm not just giving this up. I need everybody. But even they know when it's time to take a chance, know when there is some payoff with some risk. And you have the other players on the other side of the spectrum who they will sacrifice at a moment's notice. The fear of loss left them when they were little kids, and they're ready to fight to the finish. So you really have to know your own risk profile in everything that you do, and you have to be really attuned to it. But you also have to know your risk limitations, where you are afraid to do things that others, you can see that they're doing it, and you're thinking, why are they so successful? But you can see that they're willing to take that chance. And you have to really, really know yourself. And again, that often means having discussions with others, with coaches like yourself, Jim, who can say, no, I think this is where you really stand, even though you think you're otherwise. But I just want to make one more point about that. I used to think that I was the wildest attacking player ever. In my own mind, I was a gladiator running onto the field in front of 1,000 competitors. But when I analyzed my games, I realized that it wasn't the case. I was shocked. I said, wait, why am I so much more conservative than it feels when I'm sitting at the board? Again, it's very hard to know yourself. You think you know yourself, but it's extremely difficult for you to know yourself.
When you have this trusted advisor, when you have somebody from the outside looking in saying, here's what I'm seeing, Jim, here's a little bit about your wiring, you can now take action to hedge against that. You can say, okay, this is one of those scenarios, right? In business, in chess, in whatever other area of your life. This is one of those scenarios where I'm probably being overcautious. Let me be aware of that, and let me put on a new set of eyes and look at this from a little bit different perspective. So just another example of getting the right people in your life.
And I'll tell you, there was a big game, one of the biggest games in my life. It was against Michael Betzold, Grandmaster Michael Betzold of Germany. It was in Bermuda. This was 1998. And I'm playing this game, and I have two options. One is to capture his rook with my bishop. It's called winning an exchange. The rook is a better piece than a bishop in most circumstances. Or I can take a pawn. And it's a little pawn, right? So obviously a pawn is not a rook. So I'm sitting at the board, and taking the rook just seems so juicy. But taking the pawn kept all the dynamic advantages. And I sat a long time. And here's the thing. If I won that game, I get the Grandmaster title. So long story short, I take the rook and throw away my entire advantage. What I thought was going to be my rooks being more active turned out to be his bishop being far more active, the bishop that he had left. And soon I got blown off the board. I was so frustrated. This was the title on the line. And right after the game, I'm sort of moping, figuring out what am I going to do now? I got to go play in another tournament to try to get the title. And Grandmaster Alexander Shabalov was watching the game, and he said to me, you should have taken the pawn, right? I was like, yeah, I guess so. And he said, listen, you're going to have many other opportunities, but I want to tell you this. In order to become a grandmaster, you have to first be a grandmaster. And that was some kind of Yoda stuff, when I heard that. I was like, what? And it dawned on me, I got it with clarity when he said it, that I was busy trying to penny pinch my way to the title, like be safe or take the rook, right? But if I'm already in a mental space that says I'm confident, things work out, just be bold, don't rush things, don't worry about the title. If I'm already trained mentally with all my support system, with the studying that I've done, with the physical fitness stuff that I've done, then when the time comes, I'll get the title. right? Because I'm already a grandmaster. They'll just ordain it. They'll say, okay, dude, you did it. Yeah, I mean, you've been that. And that meant so much. And the next time I had an opportunity to get the title, I was playing against an international master, Adrian Negulescu from Romania. And I had a situation where, again, if I win the game, I get the title. And I had a situation where I have to give up a pawn, a very important pawn that I'd actually gained a pawn in the game before already. But now I had to give it back just to make sure my pieces danced. And usually in a situation like that, you think, well, I'll keep the pawn. And, pawn's important because a pawn can become a queen eventually. So you want to keep as many of them as you can. But in this moment, my spirit said, you know what? You can have the pawn. I'm just going to start dancing with my pieces. And I did that. I started putting pressure on him from multiple directions. And it was so much so that he collapsed under the pressure. And the winning move was what I call a beginner's move. It's the kind of move that you would see when I started playing chess back in the day in Brooklyn Tech. And I couldn't believe it. I sat there thinking, I'm about to get the Grandmaster title from playing some bogus beginner's move. And I mean bogus, but it's just so simple. Like, that's the move that gives me the Grandmaster title. But it wasn't that move. It was all the games before that got me to that point, the decisions that I had to make, the journey that I went on. And yes, when it came time, it was as simple as all that. Just drop the move on the board. There's the Grandmaster title. So in order to become, you have to be.
Whatever level, whatever you're thinking, whatever that is in your life, be that person first. Maurice, incredible. Just so much value here, so much more in your books. You have 2 books that were published in the same day. Can you talk a little bit about those books and where we can find those?
2 books being published at the same time, which is kind of a funny thing. I don't know how many authors got that to happen. It's 2 different publishers. They happen to choose the day April 2nd, which I guess now it's a very special day for me. It was just a normal day, but day after April Fool's, but now it's a special day. Move by Move is the adult book, life lessons on and off the chessboard, much of what we've been talking about now, and more of those stories and advice. And the children's book is called The Life-Changing Magic of Chess. It's for early readers who may want to get into the game, 5 to 8-year-olds, so you can get it for your young kid who may want to become a chess champ one day or a life champ. They're out. Go get it on Amazon.